This is the Reuters webinar, The New Rules of Distribution, How Carriers Can Succeed Amid Consolidation and Disruption. If you've watched the news, this is a really relevant topic that's occurred. My name is Nick Lamparelli. I am the moderator for this particular session. I am the managing partner of Insurance Nerds, and I work with Reuters here and there for conferences and things of that nature. So, like I said, this is a really relevant topic. We have two guests who will be speaking to the broker side of things, and two guests who will be speaking to the capacity and carrier side of things. So we're going to kick this off by just doing a quick round of introductions for everyone, and we'll do ladies before gentlemen. Anna, would you like to go first?
Sure. Thanks so much, Nick. Pleasure to be here. My name is Anna Codriano. I am the Senior Vice President of Distribution at Westfield Specialty. We are about 4 years old now, the specialty side of Westfield Insurance, which is a mutually held company out of Westfield, Ohio. I've been with Westfield for about 1.5 years. Prior to that, I was with Arch in wholesale distribution and spent a large portion of my career as a wholesale broker.
Thank you, Anna. Leanne?
Thanks, Nick. Hi, everyone. Leanne Barry. I am the Chief Distribution Officer at Vantage Risk, and apologies if I have an unstable internet connection. Working from home today, it's 5 degrees in Chicago, so I decided not to commute into the city. But I've been in the industry for over 20 years on the distribution side, having spent time at Arch, where Anna and I crossed paths, and at AIG before that. And looking forward to hearing from everyone today.
Leanne, it's 80 degrees where I'm at, so not
Stop.
to, not to not to make you envious.
Okay, you did.
David.
Oh, thanks, Nick. Hi, my name's David Bauer. I lead M&A in the United States for Gallagher for the RP&C division. And I joined Gallagher in 2012 after selling my brokerage to Gallagher. So I've been involved in management operations and now mergers and acquisitions.
Thank you, David. And last but not least, Chris.
And thanks, Nick, and thanks to Reuters for having me as well. I'm a broker at Brown & Brown. My role here as Senior Managing Director, leading cyber and tech. Also have been, in my career, started off on this as a broker at Zurich Re, and have been at Marsh & Willis earlier in my career.
Okay, well, thank you. And so we'll kick this off with, I think, as I mentioned, this is a really relevant topic. There's been more consolidation in the news this week, but going back through this particular year, there have been hundreds of acquisitions or mergers that have occurred, right? So I'll kick this. I want the group to answer this, but I'd like the brokers to start off first, if possible. What might be the driving force for this? Is it potentially offensive? Is it defensive? Is it both? How, from a broker's perspective, what is the impetus that's driving such rapid consolidation? David or Chris?
Yeah, I'll take a shot, Nick. So Gallagher has done well over 600 acquisitions, and so we're very prolific buyers. Our strategy is to buy brains, to continue to add talent to the organization and increase our geographic as well as our niches and talent. And the reason that I personally sold to Gallagher is we were a very successful agency in upstate New York, 10 million in revenue back in, 12 years ago. And we needed to move up market, and we needed tools and resources. And I think that's even more prevalent today with data analytics, access to large markets, captives, whatever resources. So I think that's what's continuing to drive consolidation. And now the deal you saw with Baldwin and CAC, you're seeing, or ourselves in AP, you're seeing large brokers combining to even access more talent and more resources, and it's going to continue well into the future.
Yeah. Chris, do you have an opinion on that?
Thanks. Yeah, no, I would agree with David on all of those points, and I think if you look at the recent history of Brown and Brown, we've been growing. I think from the time I joined 13 years ago, we were less than $1 billion in revenue, and now we're somewhere above five. And so a lot of that has been through acquisition and mergers and acquisitions. I think really, I very similar to David's point. I think it's adding skill sets, being able to diversify, and I think also, I think the efficiency comes into it as well, like being able to take those functions, HR, technology, other functions off the back end of some of the companies that we've purchased and consolidate those, but also add to the quiver, the arrows in their quiver, and the different types of services that we can offer through those distribution channels. I think so those are the critical points that make the pressures to consolidate and compete.
Yeah, from the carrier perspective, Leanne and Anna, it must, these are relationships that you've had. They're now merging. This can create pressure as well on the capacity side. How have your firms kind of viewed, or your personal opinions on how you viewed all of this consolidation that's been happening in the distribution area?
I can take it first, Anna, if you want. I think I'm fortunate to be at a firm like Vantage where we're really agile. We're 5 years into our journey, 4 years on the insurance side. So we're still at that point where we can respond really quickly, which I think is what's needed. I mean, the pace of this is dizzying, and it seems like as soon as you kind of figure out a firm, something changes. And I mean, what I like about that is, having done this for a long time and been in this space, it keeps it interesting. But it definitely, we have to stay on our toes and pivot. And, there's a lot of distraction that happens. Not so much the distraction and disruption is less on our side. I imagine, being in the shoes of a frontline broker who's now just had, they have, I mean, even silly things like a new email address, new employee benefits program, things that just cause a lot of distraction and disruption in one's day to day. And then, how does that kind of feed over to our be nimble, agile, flexible, and super strategic at the same time?
Anna?
Yeah, I think I like all the points that Leanne mentioned. We kind of echo because Westfield Specialty and Vantage are kind of in a similar sphere of newer startup, more limber and, like you said, agile firms. I think that also on our side, we're still operating in a boutique distribution strategy. So we're not working with every single broker. We haven't gotten to know every single broker. Our staffing is a little bit more lean. So when you have the acquisitions, it opens us up to new distribution channels. If we're open with one firm, this gives us opportunity to get to know people at other firms and expand into areas where it might have taken us a little bit longer to get there in any other manner. So I think from that perspective, it's really something we look at, and we look at where are the pockets now that are open to us to be able to engage with these people in a different way, or in a way at all if we weren't engaging before.
Yeah, that was going to be a follow-up question, Anna, around for the capacity providers. Um, how does the relationship change? Like when you see consolidation with one of your trading partners, right? Like how are you engaging with them to smooth the runway for you guys? Is there a process procedure? I'm almost thinking like, is there a checklist of things that you have to go through? So for Anna and Leanne, like how does that affect the relationship, and how do you engage to make the outcome smoother?
Well, if you have a checklist, I'd like to see it.
I know. Can you share that with me?
Please, whoever on this phone call has a checklist, please share it because I think it changes with every acquisition. I think not speaking for Leanne, but for us, as I said before, we look at it as an opportunity. So if we see that one firm that we're working with has purchased another firm, and usually the news is made public via LinkedIn or other means or publications, we like to reach out to that leadership and say, how can we help you? So if we have an appointment, how can we make it easier? Give us a list of your people, or who do we need to transition? And a lot of it comes down to, I can't remember if it was Chris or David that mentioned the data piece of it, or maybe Nick, you mentioned it, but The data piece is really important because a lot of the broker firms now have data available where they can consolidate it and see who's working in what spheres so that the appointments that we make, the engagements that we try to facilitate are worthwhile and relevant and meaningful in a way that they're going to be productive to both sides, not just the carrier. Nobody wants to have another carrier or broker opened. It's just another list on or another name on their list. So we try to engage to see where are the pockets of opportunity? Where can we help make your lives easier?
Yeah. Leanne, do you have an opinion on how to smooth it over? From your answer, it sounds like you don't have a checklist.
No, there's no checklist. I again would love one. So drop it in the chat if you have one. No, I mean I think it's everything that Anna said, but then also like it's still a relationship play. And as I thought about this webinar, as I was like kind of rolling the topics around in my brain, and there's so much chatter around data analytics, technology, efficiency, thinning margins, like it still comes back to relationships. And so, there may be, and I'm thinking particularly about, Gallagher with Woodruff, Vantage has historically, great relationship with Woodruff. AP, we just, we're not as aligned. So there's great opportunity there, but how do we it's through the existing relationships that we have. The data can lead you in the direction, can provide a nice roadmap, which is helpful, but really it comes down to sort of the human element at the end of the day.
Yeah. So for David and Chris, M&A usually means you do have some sort of checklist, but you guys are juggling a lot, right? So how much consideration is there for as you're trying to absorb, David, absorbing AP is was significant, right? Like that's eating an elephant, right? How do you do that effectively while at the same time reaching out to your trading partners as well to re-engage or engage with them in such a way to make it smoother for the combined entity to be able to work together?
Will I jump in on that? I don't know
Yeah,
if David
I
David
think David
froze.
froze. Yeah.
Yeah, so I would say we've been involved in a lot of different sort of size purchases of companies. I think historically, and maybe I'll just say more broadly, I think having some experience at other brokers, it depends upon how the strategy of the particular broker, how they want to integrate their acquisitions. I mean, there are some brokers out there who just will purchase another company and really leave it to operate as it has been. I think in some other instances, when they're in, and I think in that case, the relationships with carriers really to some degree stay the same. And then you've got the other sort of circumstances where you're integrating. And I think we are talking about, and I think we've got it later on the agenda, is talking about technology. Where you've got a broker having to decide which technologies to use in order to be able to access the carriers. I think making those decisions, and those necessarily mean that there are going to have to be changes in relationships with carriers. Those decisions get made within the broker organization in order for that to be able to happen. And I would say, and I know we're going to talk about this, the carriers really have to be working with the brokers in order to be able to differentiate in a way that really brings, I think, and both Leanne and Anna, I think, mentioned it, is bringing data, bringing a really fleet of foot approach, to be able to connect in with brokers, both from a relationship and a technology perspective, in order to be able to keep those relationships and do well with their broker partners.
Yeah. David, were you able to hear the question before you froze?
Yes, I'm sorry, Nick.
It's okay.
Yes, so our number one mantra is don't break the business. So we have all this wonderful talent and great people and uh, that we acquire, and the worst thing you can do is shake it like a snow globe. So we want those merger partners to continue, number one, serving their clients and their markets and their employees, and we're at being additive, giving them more tools and resources. Pat Gallagher says access to the candy store. We want to give them more tools. And in specific relation to the carriers, some carriers believe that, because there's an acquisition, we're going to try to, move that business to specific carriers. And that's not what we do. We, to Leanne's point, if we have like Woodruff Sawyer and they have these wonderful markets, we then take those markets and introduce them to the rest of the Gallagher network. So it needs to be additive. We never want to take away something: tools, resources, talent.
Yeah, we have a question from the audience. And by the way, my bad, housekeeping. If you have a question, by all means, there's a Q&A function here, especially if it's relevant to the topic that we're talking about. Please drop the question in the Q&A, and we'll try to weave it in. We're not having a back-end Q&A, so if you have a question, please share it with us, and I'll figure out a way to weave it in. And I have one that I can weave in, which is talking about small carriers, regional carriers, right? And as broker consolidation gets larger and larger, I think there's a sense that some regional carriers or smaller carriers will get squeezed out from those particular relationships. So, David and Chris, I think this particularly for you. How do you think about the smaller and the regional carriers?
Yeah, I can tell you we love small and regional carriers because they provide different coverages, and they're involved in different geographic parts of the United States that we need, whether it's a rural carrier or a farm carrier, an ag carrier, someone that writes in protection class 9 in upstate
Mhm.
Vermont, things like that. And you'll see that with all of our super regionals and our regionals, we grow very quickly with them, and we really are very welcoming to them.
Chris?
Yeah, I mean, I'm in my business, we don't have a lot of contacts with regional carriers. I think the cyber tech market tends to be across the United States, but if a commentary is on, smaller specialty carriers versus larger established carriers, I think, we really are very appreciative of some of the innovations that some of those smaller carriers can place in the marketplace. And I think if you look at the relationships that we have across our book, we're super supportive of those companies in order that we can deliver the best product for our clients.
Yeah. For Anna and Leanne, given the youth of both of your organizations, do you worry about potentially getting squeezed or squeezed out around this? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I can take this one. We don't have a worry of getting squeezed out. It keeps us on our toes in terms of being relevant, though. So this kind of is a good tool to reflect and say, and ask ourselves, is the product that we're offering competitive, relevant, necessary, and
Mm,
appropriate for our broker base? So not so much a worry of getting squeezed out, but Leanne and I both work for newer companies. So we're trying to create our little identity and what we want to be. And I think for us, and I would probably speak for Leanne as well, our biggest concern is not to be a flip-flop market, to not be seen early on as somebody that comes in and goes out. So we don't want to really ride any trends. We want to make sure we evaluate, we make methodical and thoughtful decisions that are, profitability focused rather than top line growth focused, because those tend to not be long-term sustainable. And that's the goal that we have.
I know it's boring, but I'm just going to agree because I don't have a counterpoint to that. I wholeheartedly agree. And I do think, I mean, yes, it's a concern, but right, it's not a fear necessarily. And again, I hate to beat a dead horse, but it really does come back to the relationships and how do this is trust that's been built. And really that's the capital that we have is the trust that we built in the market. And like Anna said, being a reliable, consistent provider. Developing solutions a need for that. So,
Yeah.
um,
That that's actually music to my ears because what you're essentially saying is that market pressure is forcing you to innovate on the insurance product. And really, the only way to do that is you need to have a strong relationship to listen to the market and your trading partners to hear what they're saying around like what they need to satisfy the risk management elements of their clients. That would be music to my ears. And I think that's a wonderful takeaway from this.
and the smaller, newer organizations, of course, I'm biased, being at one, but we have the agility. We're nimble enough. We ta at Vantage, we talk a lot about I don't know, love the term fail, but failing fast. So if like you see something's maybe headed in a direction where it's not working, let's pivot quickly, rather than, things that take seemingly eons to pivot from and see kind of proven out over time. So I think that gives us a unique advantage as well.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I think that's a marvelous takeaway for the audience. Because we'd love to see more innovation in the space. I think all of us would love to see more innovation in the space. So that would be a really positive trade-off. I want
Well,
to,
can I answer that, Nick, just for a second,
yeah,
as well as
please.
I really do think that's, I mean, that there are sort of larger organizations that can be innovative, but I think when you find companies like, like a Vantage and like a Westfield that are really looking to establish themselves in the market, the flexibility that we can, obtain from those companies and the, quick product innovation and even service innovation as well, really can make a difference and allows us on the brokerage side to deliver, products to our clients which maybe didn't exist before or maybe had different aspects to them on coverage. And that's really, it gives us a leg up uh, in a way that we didn't have before.
Yeah, I can give an anecdotal piece of data. When I started my first MGA and we were in the flood space, we sat with a couple of the top three brokers, and they essentially created the RFP for us. They said, if you build this product in this way, like we get for earthquake or like we get for these other perils, we would have no choice but to work with you because we're we're so frustrated with the current market conditions and what we have to deal with. And that's what happened. We built it the way they asked us to build it, and they bought it. So I think there's something to be said for being nimble and for innovating as well. I wanted to have a slight pivot and talk about, as these pieces are merging together, it opens up the potential for channel conflict. And I'd like to get all for the four of you, how, especially Anna and Leanne, your opinion around how, does it create channel conflict? Have you seen that? And internally, how are you dealing with that? And then for the two brokers, how do you navigate it so you can reduce the number of channel conflicts that your trading partners have? Leanne, start with you.
Sure. I mean, yes, I see it, it's a hot topic and it comes up a lot. And I think as pressures mount on the retail side, on the wholesale side, the carrier, we feel like we bear a lot of the brunt of that and our trading partners look to us to help solve some of this equation. Again, I think, I'm fortunate to be in a spot where we can be really, we have to be mindful of sort of the rules of engagement, of course, and that's, that's like table stakes. You have to really understand the landscape and the pressures that everyone is under. But we have, I think, the unique benefit of being able to, again, be pretty nimble and agile around like, what makes sense for a certain product. It doesn't have to necessarily be a one size fits all. We're a specialty carrier. Whereas I think maybe I would imagine, and having worked at larger carriers, um, need to have sort of a more holistic, what I would view as more of a one size fits all. But there are bare minimum, wholesaler protection, and really understanding the rules of engagement is the bare minimum and developing unique products that lend themselves to those different channels, and having some sort of exclusivity is I think what our brokers want, and to that end, being mindful of what they actually want, and making sure it makes sense for both sides and for the
Yeah.
client too.
Yeah. Anna?
Yeah, I want to kind of reframe the conflict word into more of a channel relevance because I feel like there are different needs between the different channels. So the needs have to be understood by carriers and even by brokers. Because the relevance, nobody wants to put out quotes for practice quoting. Nobody wants to put out products to not have 10 policies in place for a year. We want volume, we want profitability and scalability. So it's really coming down to identifying what are the needs and where can we actually align the best with partners. And also, I think coming down to knowing the company's identity. So Westfield Specialty has an identity. We're building it further, but we have an identity. We know what we're doing, with who we're doing it, and we try to adhere to that. And kind of like Leanne said, integrity and just making sure that you are being proper and knowing the rules of the game and not just changing it for one client, because that's really where the conflict comes in. You make one accommodation and then it seems like that accommodation gets spread like wildfire, and all of a sudden it's not an accommodation, it's a way you do business, and that was never the intent. So really staying true to what is it that we do, who do we do it with, and how do we do it. There's something that I heard once. It's like you can't be something to everybody or everything to everybody. So there's different quadrants, and you can be something to everybody and you can be everything to somebody. And really, those are the two areas that I think we want to play in
Mm.
to make sure that we're providing actual value to our clients.
Yeah, I like that. For the brokers, David, um, channel conflict, um, how, how do you see it from your side?
Yeah, so our brokers have no geographical territories. So if I'm in New York, I can have a client in California, for example. Now, most brokers tend to have a local clientele or a niche that they serve. But if we use it's called Gallagher Win. It's powered by Salesforce. So we use a CRM for clearing accounts, and it shows who's worked on that account. But like Nick, if you've been working on that account and you haven't been successful, and I know the CFO, for example, I'll reach out to you and I'll say, hey Nick, I see that you've been working on this account, and you tell me that you have a relationship with the CEO, but you haven't been able to, bust through to the CFO. A lot of our brokers partner, so that they partner on that account, and then they split the account. So it's very collegial and it works extraordinarily well.
Yeah. What do you do at Brown and Brown, Chris?
I think, I mean, in my mind, this I think is very different depending upon the size of the account. I think I'd echo what David is saying. I think, once you get into a certain size account and the larger accounts, I think we're very, we want to maintain the relationships, and that might be the relationship with the client and the broker. I mean, those are usually very strong. And if there's a lead primary carrier that we've been working with over the years, especially where people have been introduced to those carriers, we really want to maintain those relationships. We think it's important to have longevity in those situations. I think maybe where you're going to the relevance question is perhaps on the smaller accounts, especially where I think retail brokers and wholesalers have combined together, and the organization is looking to bring in, some of that non-owned wholesaler business back into owned wholesalers. And at some point in time, I have some pity for the carriers that are trying to deal with those issues. And I think a lot of the time it may depend upon, how much business they do with each one of the partners, how they make those decisions. From our perspective on the brokerage side, as much as we would like to have the revenue and bring it in house, which obviously we do from a profitability standpoint, we really want to maintain the relationships with the markets and historical relationships with the markets where we can. So we're pushing that as hard as we can, even though we're trying to, I think, bring some of that business into our owned wholesalers. Or quite often, I think, I mean, maybe I'll just add to that and say, as time goes on, I think a lot of those with MGAs and automation of some of those platforms for the smaller accounts. Those are starting to turn over to panels which are being backed and using technology that's coming up through the system. I mean, it's just coming up now. I think where we've got platforms that the carriers are being backed by APIs, and I'm not sure. I know from our side of the business on the cyber side, there's a lot of that happening, and I think being able to put yourself as a carrier on those panels will be critical to that type of business going forward.
Yeah, I've got an audience question here that I think sort of fits in here. So clearly, the consolidation on the brokerage side has included a lot of vertical integration, retailers merging with wholesalers, buying wholesalers, Brown and Brown, you guys, and MGAs, so specialty markets. So there's been a lot of vertical integration here. And the question from the audience member is the reverse. Carriers looking to that now also vertically integrate and move downwards and form their own MGAs, potentially wholesale divisions, or even go down to the retail sector. The example they gave was Craft Lake for Farmers Group as well. So is that sort of consolidation possible, or is that sort of expansion, that vertical integration from the carrier down to distribution also possible? Are we going to see more of that?
I'd say we are seeing some of it already, at least in our space, the space that I work in on the cyber side. I mean, some of the MGAs that were created, have been purchased by carriers, and I think, my comment would be that the MGAs tend to be like small carriers, tend to be more innovative, creative, coming up with products in a way and distribution in a way that some of the more established carriers don't have necessarily in-house, or it takes them longer to establish those tech platforms in-house. And so I would say for sure, absolutely, I would imagine we're going to see more of that going forward.
Anna, Leanne, from the carrier side, I mean, you don't have to talk about anything that's privy, but would you expect that more carriers would look to vertically integrate with, I've seen it with the MGAs as well, but could it extend down to wholesale or looking to have a firmer control on the distribution flow?
I think that's a very fair point, and what Chris said is kind of what we've seen a lot of MGA type of trickling down yet. I think it's a little bit harder to get into true broking because the conflict there, and that truly is a conflict, is a little too great to ignore. It's just so blatantly in your face, and it would be a conflict, and you'd question what the value to the insured would be ultimately. So, plus also the cost and the startup and the whole operations side behind the scenes might be a little too inundating. So there's always the concept of profitability on everybody's mind. So it's wherever they can make a profit reasonably and without, again, disturbing the core nature of the business. Because I think the last thing you want is to take some small piece of business at the risk of losing 80% of your substantial book. So you really have to walk a fine line on the carrier side with that.
Yeah.
And
David,
Nick,
you have any thought? Yeah,
yeah,
please.
ultimately, I think it's what's best for the client. So, MGAs, MGUs, very innovative. They've got a lot of technology now that they can use to support their niche. And the carriers, it allows them, to disperse risk-based capital, so it works well. And as a broker, we want the right product for our clients, and that we're pretty agnostic to where it comes from. It can come from a specialty carrier, an MGA, an MGU, or a wholesaler. So what's in the best interest of the client? And I think that's what's driving the marketplace now.
Yeah. Uh, Another slight segue here. How is this going to affect compensation? Um, Margins are thin. I'm sure David and Chris, you brought up that consolidation, you get to consolidate expenses as well and find economies of scale. that you can enter into. But it opens the door to new compensation structures. You can get to fee-based and commission. What is the thought process around? We'll start with the brokers first. When there is consolidation, what is the thought process around compensation, and how might that change in the near future?
Yeah, so I'll tell you that we most of our business is based on commission products and standard commission. Um, we also have fee agreements for larger accounts, and we're we're pretty agnostic to whether it's a fee or a commission, as long as it's fair to the client and it's market based.
Yeah. Chris?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would agree with that. And I mean, I think it finally at the end of the day, I think we've got to do the right thing by our clients is our end goal. Um, where we have an ability, I think, it certainly does help to where, you're a larger organization and you're producing a volume of business for certain carriers. It definitely gives some leverage. I'd say two places it gives leverage. It gives leverage, for pricing, both from the broker's income, but also for our clients, to be able to give them better um, pricing on premiums. But also, I think, if we have a volume with going to certain carriers, it gives us the opportunity to negotiate broader coverage, unique coverages, to provide better services to the market. So I think is that at some place, perhaps the carriers might not feel so kindly to it, but we're in the business of trying to be profitable, but also do the best for our clients.
Yeah. Yeah. So Leanne, Anna, this the compensation's coming from you, right? So at the end of the day, how are you guys navigating these waters?
It's tricky. It's definitely fraught with, lots of, I mean, I believe that the best ways, the thing, the strategies that work the best are where there's mutual skin in the game, benefits for both sides. We as a young growing organization are very mindful of our expenses, expense ratio, combined ratio. So but we know that there's we understand how, kind of how it all fits together. And we understand the pressures that the brokers have, and we understand the rate environment, and we understand sort of our place in the equation. So I think, and there's different ways that I've seen brokers structure sort of their carrier partnership agreements. And there's everything from fee for service to commission overrides to incentive-based structures where, hey, if we bind this much of this kind of premium in this geography or whatever, however you want to design it, will come to the plate with, some additional compensation, however that might look. So I personally like those types of agreements and situations as there's mutual sort of some kind of reciprocity baked in. Um, but it's tricky, it's tough. I'm not an underwriter. But I know underwriters typically don't love when the distribution team tells them, oh, we just signed a new deal, unless they see the value, unless they, and oftentimes the data that we pay for is maybe it's clean, maybe it's not, and it just really is. Brokers do it very differently, I will say. So yeah, Anna, I'd love to hear your take on this.
Yeah, I have a lot of the same experience that you have, and compensation is just one element of the deal, right? It's an important element. It can't be overlooked, but it's just one element that is taken into consideration when placing the deal and looking out for the client ultimately. So I think that I echo what Leanne said. I like the agreements that get creative. Nobody wants to pay more money for the same thing that they had last year, right? On just because there's got to be some kind of differentiation. So I like where there's growth incentives. I like where there's a challenge or some sort of a benchmark or some kind of ambition or goal, I should say, to reach where you say,
Mm,
okay, you've done your part, you've clearly partnered with us. there's a compensation differentiation that can be done for that. And, we're involved in a lot of those. We're talking about a lot of those. It seems like it's becoming a little bit more commonplace to discuss it among all the brokers. So it's something that has to be constantly front of mind. To Leanne's point, the data is valuable if it's used right. So making sure that whatever both sides are agreeing to, they're making full usage of, and that there's accountability on both sides. So I think compensation, where it can't be just a flat topic on its face, commission 10% or 12%. You have to be market competitive in your space. But at the same time, there's got to be a level at which, okay, there's other areas or other ways to amend the compensation rather than just constantly increasing commission. If you're buying business, the next person that buys it for more is going to take it from you. So it's not a long-standing partnership you're building.
Mhm. How does the brokerage data figure into this? So, them compiling their book and making it available. Um, it seems like this is a new model and a way for brokers to get compensated where it can, move slices of the pie, so to speak. How do you guys feel about that element, the brokerage data, and making that available to the carriers?
Sure, I can take that one first. I personally love the data component of it because in the past with distribution, you'd have to do a lot of footwork to identify opportunities and identify areas. Now you're getting a lot of that upfront from the source. So whereas internal data, we have what we have. So we know our world. We don't know what other world there is outside of us. We don't know what other business exists. The brokers providing us with their aggregated kind of categorized data allows us to say, okay, this office is somewhere that we haven't even looked at because we don't do anything with them. So in our records, we have nothing. We don't know that they exist. But clearly there are missed marker, missed opportunities. So let's see if we can focus on it. So it's almost making it a lot more efficient for us to go out
Hmm.
and engage with them in a strategic way. And I think that deserves some sort of a compensation, adjustment, because if they're doing some of the work for us and helping guide us in the right direction, that's valuable.
Valuable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's
Yeah.
all comes down to how you use it. And I think, there are a lot of carriers that probably pay for that data and use it to varying extents and if whether they use it efficiently or not. I also have to imagine as a broker, knowing that your carrier partner kind of already has a peek into your book leads to a much more efficient discussion on their side too, because then I'm calling, David and saying, hey, I see you've got these three deals coming up over the next few months. They're right in our appetite. Here's why we'd like to write them. And that makes your renewal strategy discussions, hopefully a little bit easier. So it's an efficiency play, I think, on both sides. Really smart. It just comes down to, oh, I probably cut out here. Sorry for my internet.
No,
Um,
you're good. You're good.
but yeah, it comes down to how you use it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Nick, and we agree with that. It also allows our brokers to find markets that they would normally not think about. So the data is anonymized, and it doesn't mean just because they've seen an account or if Leanne approaches us and says, "Hey, I really like this account," that we're automatically marketing it. It's still what's in the best interest of the client, but it allows us to really understand the marketplace in a much better way. It certainly beats the bagels and donuts routine.
I miss the bagels and donuts.
I do too. I I haven't missed them a
My,
lot, as you can see, but I
yeah.
I do miss the bagels and donuts.
Hey, Chris, do you have an opinion about
No, I'll just say
broker
we
data?
don't do that in our group. Maybe I'm missing out. I should come to Anna and Luann and have a discussion on that. But um, I mean, we do share information on our book with our key markets that we work with, and I think that's largely in order to understand the appetite and be able to sort of make sure that we're opening opportunities for both our clients and carriers where we think there are great fits.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. I think it's a really useful topic. It definitely changes the compensation model, but I think, as Anna and Leanne said, it makes their job more efficient because they don't have to throw darts in the dark. They can kind of drill in and see, is there something there or not? And if there is, how do we go about doing that? Which, since we're talking about data, I think, and this is a proper segue to technology as well. We're seeing lots of news stories about what AI is doing and what it can do, and frankly, a lot of scary forecasts around what that's going to mean for jobs. So I'll start with the brokers around the consolidation. I'm imagining your firms have been implementing AI or testing AI in some manner or another. How do you see those technologies coming into place, especially when there is this consolidation? You're bringing a new firm in, there may not be room for everybody as well. And there could be situations where the AI is essentially taken over doing part of the workflow or part of the job. How are you guys thinking about this, what feels like a really true innovation that's occurring that is likely going to probably change the game just like the internet did?
Yeah, I'll skip that off because actually, while we're doing this, I really should be on the second part of an AI call. It's from our IT group. So I came off that in order to do this call. So I,
Priorities.
I feel like I got the first half though, so I sort of understand some of it. Um, and I mean, there's a lot happening, I think, especially on just automation of looking at documents, bringing, using agentic AI, being able to compare documents, being able to create files, being able to look at, loss runs over the years, consolidate all of that information. There's a lot of that that's going on. And I think that's going to be a great value to the brokerage community. A lot of information that's going to be available to us. One of the questions I had for our team was, where does the connection come in to be able to automate the process on the underwriting side? Do we connect in with carriers? And apparently, I mean, the feedback I got was that some carriers at the moment are resistant to sharing information and connecting in with brokers. Some carriers are there, and I think we on our AI team is, the strategy is to try to talk with more carriers to get them comfortable with the idea of connecting. I mean, I'll say it's a very difficult situation where I think some of the underwriting tech, some of it's being created on the carrier side. We on the brokerage side are creating it. Wholesalers are creating their own tech as well. And then you have, a whole group of tech companies that are trying to sell platforms to the insurance industry, right? Then I think, different carriers and different brokers are picking different platforms. I think in the short term, having all of those platforms work together is going to be difficult to do, and I think carriers are going to have to choose who they're supporting, but that may limit their ability to connect in with some brokers when the brokers have chosen another platform. And I know it's expensive to uh, keep on creating APIs on the back end for carriers to make it work. So interested to hear the carriers' thoughts on this as well.
Yeah, Nick, we're investing heavily into AI as well, and right now we see it as a tool for whether it's policy comparisons, contract review, things like that. And as it becomes, as it advances and things, we can put it into different workflow areas, whether it's Gallagher Bassett in claims reviews and helping contract reviews, or it's policy checking. So I think it's obviously very early on in the early stage, but we're we're using it and learning just like everyone else, and trying to get it to become a really quality tool.
Anna Leanne, how does AI affect um, how brokers engage with you guys?
I think for us, and we're not novel in this method, but when you have consolidation, you have an influx, at least for us, newer carriers have an influx of submissions, probably from brokers that we haven't worked with in the past, or we're appointing new brokers. So it's about doing more with less. So more business with the same amount of underwriters, maybe a couple more, but not scaled on a one-to-one increase. So we're using AI to help our underwriters understand the submissions they're getting, prioritize them. What should they be looking at first? What's the full submission? What questions can they ask? So helping guide them on how to be the most effective and the quickest to provide terms back. That can be in a number of different ways, but that's really the core at what we're trying to get at, one of the cores.
Yeah, Leanne?
Yeah, I wouldn't think today that a broker would notice how Vantage is using AI right now. I don't think there's like, any sort of interface that they would see differently. I think similar to Anna and similar to the brokers on the call too. Like we're sort of hoping to make the underwriter's job a little less painful, a little bit more efficient, take away some of the non-value added tasks, reading a 200-page PDF cyber submission to find one data point. Like, is that really what we want our senior underwriters doing? So how can we use AI and technology to help streamline that for them and not take away the thinking part of their job? And we view talent as our number one asset, and we hire people who are strategic thinkers and critical thinkers and analytical, and we certainly don't want to lose that. So it's a fine balance. But yeah, right now, just streamlining submission, scrubbing and intake. And it's funny, I saw something not related to insurance the other day. It was probably on my LinkedIn, but it was, somebody puts into, I don't know what tool it was, if it was Chat GPT, and said, what day is it today? And it was this sequence where they kept getting the wrong answer. And I think we just have to remember that this is so new. And I would imagine our conversation a year from now is going to be a lot different. It's moving very quickly, but right now, I don't think we're quite there at the point where we want a broker to be interfacing with, AI instead of an underwriter.
I think there would be some folks, especially on the technology side, who are expecting that some of the work will be AIs talking to each other, passing information along, which leads me to an audience question who's says, as someone who is new in the distribution role at a carrier after being a broker for many years, what advice would you give me in today's distribution climate? That's the climate for this person is radically different than the climate that we have all been in because of this AI technology. How important will relationships remain in the future?
I can actually take that one first because just a couple years ago, I was a broker and then came back into the distribution side. So probably the newest in the space. But I would say, as a broker, you're kind of working in your world of your accounts, your book, your office, whatever world that is, and you know your space. And coming into distribution, especially with AI, the data piece, knowing how to analyze and understand and use data, not just be able to read an Excel spreadsheet, but make assumptions and logical deductions from it, because that's what drives you in the direction that you need to go into to be able to do your role in distribution. So it's being able to kind of see a macro lens versus your micro portfolio book, industry, whatever role of the broker that you are in. You're not in a global type of landscape when you're a broker. You're very focused. So this is a lot more broad, and being able to it could be also overwhelming. So if you don't know how to use AI and you don't know how to use the data and be able to analyze it to give yourself a roadmap, it can kind of scare you off and make it very, analysis paralysis, like limiting to what you can do.
Hmm. Hmm.
We could have a whole session on advice that Anna and I have, and I'm sure others too have advice for somebody, newer to distribution coming from a broker side or an underwriter side. But I would say, yeah, the data, we talk so much about data analytics technology, and that's a core part of it, but you need to be a jack of all trades. You need to be able to feel comfortable being uncomfortable, not having all the answers. Um, Not, I'm sure as a broker, you're a specialist in your area, in your whatever discipline you're in, product, industry, whatever. And coming to this side, you have to be okay not knowing a lot about, be an inch deep and a mile wide. Having relationships is critical, but knowing how to tap into those relationships is the game changer. And building trust. I can't state that enough.
Yeah.
That's what it all, it's
I
people
think there's a
business. Sorry, it is. So
I think there's a real positive here, though. I think, as we go forward and a lot of I think the things that David was talking about, policy comparison, contract review, invoicing, all of those administrative tasks get taken off our plate. I think, at some level of company size, when the buyer of the insurance really expects to have a relationship with their broker and a relationship with their insurance carrier as well. Um, I mean, what I do think this does is, gives us the opportunity, all of us, to be able to, focus on things like I think that they're really interested in, like risk assessment, pricing, innovation on products, and allows us to expand those relationships because we've got more time and energy. Yes, perhaps, we will have an ability to take, staff off and have less number of people, but I think the depth of the services that we may have for our clients uh, may expand. And I think I'm hoping and thinking that's going to be a real positive.
Yeah. Uh, so we have about 4 minutes left. I got a handful of audience questions. One that's interesting is from a friend of mine. There's been a lot of chatter on LinkedIn about brokers not even reading their policies and meeting with clients, understanding what is material changed in the business. You are seeing more around brokers are so overwhelmed with a lot of the work that they're doing that it feels as though in some cases there's a superficiality in what it is that they're doing. Um, Not asking anyone to admit that that's what's actually happening, but could that become an outcome with rapid consolidation is that the teams get overwhelmed and they're not may not be necessarily giving the client the full benefit of what they promise.
Yeah, I'll jump on that, Nick. I think if it's a strategic broker, I think exactly the opposite of that. I think to Chris's point, if we're good at what we do in providing those backroom services, taking the HR, the legal, the IT, the accounting off of those brokers' desks, and then their job is truly to provide the right um, coverage analysis and the market support for their client, then it should be completely the opposite. We should be giving them more tools and resources that they can focus on that client relationship.
Yeah, I think I agree with you, David, on that one for sure. I mean, the fact that, we did, no one's going to admit that they don't read policies, but sometimes, people get busy in their day. But I think when you are able to have a piece of software now that you can bring a policy up on one page, bring another policy up, which is the renewal policy on another page, and it instantly highlights all of the changes year over year. That's a 1-2 second task that perhaps might have taken an hour or two previously. So that, the efficiency that comes from that is just welcoming from our perspective.
Yeah, yeah. I'm going to finish this off with getting your forecast for 2026 and for each of you, whether you think the consolidation will keep at this pace, yes or no. And David, I have a final question for you that an audience member specifically asked.
Oh boy. uh, So I'll start off with the consolidation. I don't see anything that's going to stop it. And you're seeing transformative deals like we saw this week with Baldwin and CAC, and my friend from Brown and Brown with Risk Strategies, and us with AP, and Aon with NFP, and Marsh and McGriff. I mean, it's just uh, the deals are getting bigger, and the consolidation is accelerating. So I don't see a change.
Anyone else?
I'm going to jump in because one thing we haven't talked about is, yes, this consolidation, but is there a flip side to that? That are there new brokerages being and carriers? I mean, we've got Anna and Leanne both at 3-4 year old carriers there, and CAC is only with new capital coming in, people willing to invest in new brokerages. Is there new competition coming in from to small to mid-level brokers that are going to be specializing and innovating and growing very quickly, that are always going to be the next broker that's going to be purchased, because there's new brokers coming into the mix. But David's probably a good example of that. I don't know, David, how when you sold your brokerage to Gallagher, if you created that from scratch, you're probably a great example of that. And if that's going to be continuing on, maybe there will continue to be bigger brokers, but there'll always be smaller and mid-level brokers coming up through the system as well.
Yeah. Anna, Leanne, parting thoughts? Consolidation, will it continue at this pace?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I see it. I don't see it slowing down. It might change in the types of consolidation. There's only so many behemoths that can merge together.
Right.
But I think there's going to be a lot more smaller brokers joining more regional brokers, carriers merging as well, maybe renewal rights deals. I don't see any of that slowing down in 26.
Leanne,
Great. We got
same.
to keep it interesting.
Okay. David, very last question. With all of this consolidation, audience member wants to know whether EBITDA multiples will stay the same or raise.
So, yeah, great question. Uh,
David, this webinar is recorded.
yes, I understand. Thanks, Anna. Thanks for the reminder. Um, so, uh, historically, right now, we're at very high EBITDA multiples, and it's been driven by by private equity, by consolidation, by talent. I think good firms will always have a very reasonable and competitive multiple. And at this point, I would say I think we're in the higher part of the cycle, and the supply and demand. Yes, there's less supply, and where there's less supply and equal demand, there's going to be a competitive market.
Yeah, got it. Very political answer to that. Thank you.
Yeah, hopefully I
Um,
keep my job.
I think you did a good job there. So that brings us to the end of this webinar. I want to thank all of you that stuck around. Even we went a little bit over, and we still have almost 100 people who are watching this. So thank you. Thank you for the audience for your questions, and a big thanks to Anna, Leanne, David, and Chris for the insightful comments. I'm Nick Lamparelli, and until next time, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, Nick.